Ziggy started showing symptoms, I would say, around 3 weeks old. Every feed, he would vomit, he would cry non-stop, 24 hours a day. Paediatrician looked at him, did no tests whatsoever, just said to us that he was a vomity baby. Within a few days, he started vomiting blood. So we took him straight to A&E. He was blue, barely breathing. The blood tests came back within a very short space of time, and they said to us that he was in complete renal failure. They did so many tests. They did lumbar punctures, they did tissue biopsies, and then they started looking elsewhere, and eventually spoke to the geneticists who looked at our whole story, interviewed us both, looked at our histories, and recommended that we did a trigenome blood test. Our consultant and the geneticist sat us down and explained that it wasn't anything that they had expected. That condition is a malfunction of the liver. The liver is unable to excrete oxalate from the body, which therefore builds up in the body and affects pretty much every part of the body as little crystals. We asked what our options were for treatment. She obviously explained to us that there were no treatments and that his only option was to have a liver transplant. And then ultimately a kidney transplant to obviously replace his failed kidney function. And I think then the enormity of what was in front of us became apparent. Colin didn't hesitate to put his hand up and say of course he would be that donor. Just ahead of Ziggy's liver transplant, once we realised the odds, we decided to have a naming ceremony rather than a christening at home. We planted a rowan tree out in the field, being known as a tree of life, and just to sort of symbolise really Ziggy, the journey he's been on. It's a day that meant a lot to us because we weren't sure if Ziggy was going to come home from liver transplant. On the day of the operation, I couldn't explain the anxiety to know that the two people that I love most in the world were both in theatre. We got news that Colin's liver had been removed and that it all looked good for Ziggy. And then Ziggy took a bit of a turn for the worst. They'd found that the portion of liver that Colin had donated had already started to die due to a thrombosed hepatic artery. They told us that Ziggy had approximately 48 hours to live unless he got a second transplant, and that he would be put on an emergency transplant list for a cadaveric liver, so someone that had deceased. And our only hope was basically waiting for that to happen, which is a horrible, horrible situation to find yourself in. And we got a call in the middle of the night to say that they believed another liver had become available and they were preparing to take Ziggy back to theatre. And he pulled through a second time, amazingly. Then one morning I came in and the nurse who had been looking after him said he'd had a really restless night. They came back and told us that he'd had some kind of blockage in his bowels and he would have to go for emergency surgery. They'd had to remove 25 centimetres of his upper ileum due to a twist in the bowel that had gone gangrenous. 3 operations that Ziggy had where they had basically cut his abdomen open in the same place 3 times. And then he started to progress. They started to wean him off the medicines. We knew that the more dialysis he got, the higher the chances that that kidney, when he got it, would not fail. We were taught how to do home hemodialysis. Colin learnt how to use the machine, how to connect and disconnect him. So we became a bit of a tight-knit team to enable us to come home and do our own hemodialysis and prevent us having the 4 hours a day stuck in a taxi getting to and fro hospital. Finally though, they said it was time for him to have his kidney transplant. Once again, both my boys were in hospitals 2 miles apart, and I sat and waited for the news that Colin's kidney was out and that it had made its way across the city to the Children's Hospital. They successfully inserted the kidney, and he came back to ICU, and just one day his bloods looked so much better and they backed off on the dialysis and the kidney took over, and the relief was immense. He just flourished, didn't he? He got this new lease of life, new energy.
No, sorry, carrots.
Today, Ziggy's PH1 journey continues. It's still very involved. We still have lots of visits to hospital. He's under a lot of different specialists: cardiology, gastroenterology, the eye hospital, and obviously renal and the liver team as well. He's on a hyperhydration program, which continues to be just under 2 litres of fluid a day.
Then there's also the associated elements of the complexities of transplants and understanding it, whether it be for the liver or the kidney, the associated life living with immune suppression.
There have been lots of developments in the condition. There are more experts in the world and there is more focus on the condition.
Ziggy is, despite all he's been through, is an amazing, bright, intelligent, fun, loving individual. He's emotional, caring, and just the intensity of his play and diversity of engagement on all sorts of subjects, whether it be sea life, dinosaurs, technology. He just embraces it all, and he flits around and just doesn't let up for all his waking hours. As we look out of our window every day, we can see the rowan tree. It has kind of grown taller, stronger, and as established as part of this sort of family household, really. I think there is light at the end of the tunnel, irrespective of how bleak it feels at the beginning.